Make sure that, because I've seen this before, like I think someone tried to do like an app video game, and they just literally, they said, you know, this is the world of goo, and then they picked like one song out of it, and I'm like, this isn't the world of goo, and I had to listen to the entire thing. I was like, there's this jazzy part, and then there's this other thing, da da da, and so like, you know, I was like, my biggest, you know, thing is, while this might be cool for you, make sure that you're getting the whole game into your arrangement. So, yep. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kira. We're going to move on to our last panelist now, Jose.
Hey. All right, guys. So we're going to bring it back down a little bit to earth. So the one thing we all have in common here is that we're all involved either with the founding or sustaining of game orchestra. So most of us are here are actually conductors. So I want to go over some real examples of some of the stuff we have done. Mostly stuff I've done with game music ensemble, but I know at least one of these scores has been done by, in fact, one of them was performed here today by the Washington Metropolitan Symphony, which was a fantastic show, and has also been done by Maryland GSO as well. So let's pull these up here. And probably grab this here, and you know, we were challenging the.
Yeah, let me close
Had a
up
few
this.
technical challenges earlier, but I think I'm just going to plug in my iPad directly into the sound system, and hopefully that won't make anything explode. All right, here we go. Is that stuck on something here? There we go.
Second.
Cool. Oop, careful. There we go. All right, that should do it.
Okay, cool. I wanted to.
So, you know, while we're getting that set up, so a lot of us are, you know, very interested in arranging and conducting, and basically what that comes down to is what is known as score analysis. This is what a conductor does when, you know, if you think of Dudamel in his study, or, you know, Sir Simon Rattle. What is he doing back there? You know, he's probably just got a handful of markers and he's going over his score, trying to figure out those, not just, you know, understanding the structure of the music, but also, you know, really digging deep and applying his musical knowledge to identify those moments that are just going to make that piece extra special and tie it back down to rehearsal techniques. And also, you know, a lot of those things are dependent on that particular ensemble. So we have certain challenges with our ensemble. Professional orchestras have their own challenges as well. And knowing your group is essential to getting a great performance. All right, and I do have a few slides. We don't have as much time to go over all of them, but it's just to give you a little bit of background. As I said, bring it back down to earth a little bit. And so this is our last concert. This is us performing Wrath of the Lich King from World of Warcraft. And we had, you know, full orchestra, we had a choir, big organ, biggest gong in LA as well. And everyone just had a fantastic time. I'm just going to flip through all these different concerts, rehearsals, you know, stuff that's going on. LA's most important orchestra, America's most important orchestra is in LA, apparently. So, a few of my favorite scores, I'm going to pull up right here real quick, and we're going to go take a listen to them. And let's see here. Who here, who's familiar with World of Warcraft music? Awesome. You know, it is probably up there. You know, I hate picking favorites, but if you had to pick, if you put a gun to my head, this is probably my favorite kind of music. And in fact, with our orchestra, when we started really developing and really expanding, one of my goals was to try to get as much as possible, you know, like try to be able to do these scores as accurately as possible. I think if we just drag that over, it should work.
Will you be okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
I don't need
that's
it.
fine.
I don't see it. I probably memorized this already. So ignore like my bad, you know, penmanship right here. But this is Wrath of the Lich King, which I'll play very briefly here. And I'll play our version. You know, I was considering playing the studio version, but I'll play the real version. So there's a few interesting things going on right here. So it begins with this introduction with like this aleatoric, there's no quite pitch center here, and it goes on to what is known as the Heroes of Legends of Azeroth theme, which is this. It's the theme that every single expansion has a bum 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 ba da 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 dum bum. So we kind of move on to that right there. Every single one of these themes kind of begins with that there. That's a contrabass trombone right there. That's like the note that he was hired to do right there. How's the quality on the projector? Can you guys see all right? A little better, you know. So right there in that circle, that was that gigantic note we heard by the contrabass trombone. So one thing right here, So as you guys are listening to this, you guys hear that 7 beat, what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So in our orchestra, we let anyone from any level join. People just get, they go in there barely able to do a scale. By the time they're done doing one season, they're like fantastic. So we do have a teaching component, and this is one part that I always have to go through, explain the 7. And the key right here in this theme is that beat on the 1, the 3, and the 5. So as you were listening, it was a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's just one way you can do a 7. There's several other ways you can combine 4s and 3s, which are also, in fact, in the score. And, in the interest of time, I don't think I'm going to, maybe I can find them here somewhere. You'll see a big 4 plus 3 somewhere here. That might have been right there. So the other section in 7, it's a little faster. So we do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So what really makes these sections special is, it seems like such a simple, obvious thing, but when you're right in the middle of things and everyone's got, it's like herding cats sometimes. Everyone has a different idea of how to do it. So getting that knowledge in there, that this is the important thing, getting those beats in there, getting those accents on the right beat, that's just going to make everything sound together. It's going to make the piece drive itself forward, and it's going to be a more enjoyable listening experience. And in the end, that's what it's all about. Everything we're talking about today, it's basically just coalescing all that and bringing it to life. And that's, I think a big part of our mission here. So moving on to the next one here. So this is another really great arrangement by Doug Eber, who was playing bassoon over by with Washington Metropolitan Symphony. So as I was listening, who got to see that show, by the way? Did anyone get to? Wasn't it a fantastic performance? I thought so too. And this is actually a piece we have performed as well, and they did a fantastic job. But I couldn't help but compare it to mine. And they're both great. But one thing I always want to do. So this is our version here. So I took it a little slower right here. So this is this whole section is in 12/8. And I don't know if you can, did I pull up the right score? Yeah. So this is, it's commonly used, I know there's this one, some of the Beethoven masses have this, and it's a time signature that is known as a Sicilian Dance. So it's not quite a waltz, but it's got like this impetus where you're putting down your foot, ba-da-da, triple it. So for me, it happens every time. Unless we give that direction, not everyone's going to do it. And some people might do it, but unless you give that clear instruction that this is what we're doing, we're going to emphasize those particular elements of this piece, that's just going to make it extra special. As I said, it seems like an obvious thing, but it's almost like, running a marathon where like, just got to put one foot forward, put another foot forward, But all those things do add up, and like having the right form does really make a difference. So let's see. So as I said, it was great, and there's the waltz moment also towards the end of that piece as well. And one particular thing, one challenge we had, I'll go back to that piece, is that right here, the theme for this particular Gwen, Lord of Cinder, if I recall correctly. One thing is that, we have a freaking huge orchestra, so we're really trying to get those solos there. One of the things we had to do was just get people to play as little as possible. That's just what it took right here to get just the right balance, where sometimes people don't really hear how much they're projecting. So being up there as a conductor, one of the main things we have to do is kind of like be a real-time. I told them as quietly as possible right here, and they did it. And they're the best. So you just don't know how much you're doing. So we're up there being real-time mixer, like trying to make the sections sound the way they're supposed to sound to the audience, which is going to be right behind us. So I really love this arrangement. And speaking of resolution, the original version of this arrangement didn't actually resolve. It left you hanging on, like, I don't even remember what chord it was, but it was like maybe a fourth or something on the fourth. And so I was talking to Doug about it, and like we made some modifications to make it work with our ensemble, but I just couldn't stand that unresolved ending, so I changed it and I added a resolution to it, and I sent it back to him. And the version I heard today had that resolution, and I saw him after, and I was like, did you guys do what I think you did? Like, yeah, we resolved it. We used your version. All right, great. I can sleep at night now. That chord won't keep me awake. All right, so I'm going to move on to another great, another one of my favorite scores. That's what I say in rehearsal all the time. This is another one of my favorite pieces. Like, basically everything we play is like fan favorite. Can't go wrong with this. So this is Wind Waker. This is the Symphony of the Goddess version, and I am terrible at moving the mouse backward here. I'm just trying to get rid of that sidebar here. This is a really long piece. I don't have too much time, but there's a lot of stuff going on. So as you can see, like, all right, everything you see in red is important. Something there has to happen. Things have to come in together. Cues are happening. Different time changes, different rhythms. And not everyone's counting. Sometimes you're just sitting there and like you need these cues and you need this direction in order to keep it together. But one thing in particular I like about this arrangement is that it has this Irish section towards the end over here. Anyone familiar with Irish music? Has anyone ever jammed like with a trad group? Yeah. So the thing about that is that everyone can just jump in. You have a choral instrument, you got your chords. If you have your melodic instrument, you're just playing along with the A section, the B section. And that, in fact, is something we had in this piece right here. I think it's coming up here. Either way, it's not like a great resolution anyway. I don't like that ending too much. But, so here's where it happens. So one thing that was, that we had to highlight was the original key in this was actually D flat. And I think one of you guys already brought it up. It's an interesting sounding key, but it's a terrible key for Irish music. And the reason why is because a lot of time, if you're a fiddler in an Irish band, you want to play those open strings, you want to play with this agility that you simply can't have if you're up here on a higher position, So we tried doing it in D flat, and the next rehearsal, like, nah, man, we got to change it back to D. And not only that, I couldn't even find a whistle in D flat. They might make them, but I definitely couldn't get it like Amazon Primed in time for the next rehearsal. So I changed it back to D, pretty easy change, just changed the key signature. And it worked. Everyone was just so much more like into it. They weren't like worried about like what their fingers were doing. And on top of that, you guys see a lot of those tied notes down there. So some people have the melody, as you can see, but some people have those long notes. And if you're not careful, those notes will get loud, especially in the brass, especially in the strings as well. So another thing we had to do there was literally play with all the mutes you got as quietly as possible, and that was just the right amount of volume we needed in order to get that tin whistle across. And it worked. It was, how's it go? So this one too, I feel like I don't know if I did this consciously or not, but a lot of these have the, gonna have like this odd rhythm to it, where this one's in 9/8, which kind of translates to a 3-beat pattern, but all of them have that all-important impetus, that all-important ictus on each of those beats right there. So making sure that everyone is really feeling that is something that we have to convey as conductors. So another one you may have heard of here. It's another one of those that's going down in the canon of VGM repertoire. Who has heard of this little game called Journey by Austin Wintory? He's oftentimes here. I think he's not here at this MAGFest, but he sometimes is. And this is just, you know, orchestras all around the country just really want to do this piece. And one particular thing, I will play a clip from this one, just in case anyone here for some reason hasn't heard it. So it's got this famous cello solo here. I think it was Tina Guo, if I recall, who did this one. But most importantly, it's got this beautiful bass flute solo right here. I'm gonna jump a little more ahead. Yeah, I just got one more. So, contrasting this a little bit to some of the other stuff I've shown already, this is very tender, very expressive piece. And you can see a little bit of that in the score. Very romantic and absolutely dependent on getting all these entrances correctly. Like if you just look at the strings down there, it's like, what are they doing, you know? So you can't always rely on that internal clock. And players just perform more confidently, perform on time and more beautifully if the conductor is cueing them correctly, giving them, lending them that confidence, encouraging them. It really does work. Like it, you know, I was considering starting this by saying, like, what do conductors even do? Why do you even need a conductor? I've honestly actually heard this question done before. It's like, that orchestra seems to be playing itself. That guy's just waving his arms. What is he doing, you know? So a lot of what happens, if anyone's ever been part of an orchestra, the conductor's job at the show is basically done. By the time we get to the show, we've gone through the entire rehearsal cycle. In some cases, we've had like a 4-month rehearsal cycle, like when we did need it, you know, when we had the show later on in the quarter, where we just work through these pieces. We, you know, just really try to dig deep into them and, you know, just bring the music to life, you know. And a lot of that's, almost everything everyone else on this panel has talked about does come up. You know, we encourage everyone in our orchestra to go and research the pieces, like, you know, play the game as well, you know, get a deeper understanding for what we're trying to convey. And I think for the Journey piece, and I've also heard it done by many other orchestras, we went all out this time. It has a very special instrument that isn't, it's not that rare, but I'll play it here real quick. You guys hear that? So those are bell plates. That's a percussion instrument. It's these giant square panels of metal that create this kind of like gong feeling to it. Those are actually sometimes substituted with a different instrument. But we decided to go all out. We got the bell plates. And I felt like they were absolutely essential with this kind of piece where they're solely everywhere. Just having all these things in the right place made this piece of music work. And
So
as I
the conductor's job is done, more or less done by that. Why do you have a conductor?
Because, so there's 3 things we do. So if you ask a conducting teacher, and this is like my first conducting lesson, this is what we do. So we do 3 things. This is a Russian guy, so I have this Russian teacher for a conducting teacher. So we do 3 things. We do the tempo, we set the dynamics, and we also instill the character into the piece. So almost everything I've talked about so far has been one of those 3. And I think we spend more time on character, dynamics, and then, you know, tempo, of course, you know, we don't want to just be metronomes as well. We want to give a little bit of like an impulse in our own, you know, kind of like organic progression to a lot of these phrases, you know. So even though, as I said, we do most of the work, so we're basically just going to replay a lot of what we already did already, you know. So what we're doing for the actual show is basically repeating what we've been rehearsing for sometimes months at a time. So, and as I said, if you go and see, this is why a lot of orchestras out there, like, why do we need another version of the Fifth? Why do we need to see, like, Sibelius 7 again? It's because every conductor will bring something different to each piece, and each rendition. Music is not this absolute discrete thing. You know, it can be if you're in the DAW, right? Like everything's defined. But even in the DAW, sometimes you like especially when you're first starting out, you realize you might sometimes be limited by like the piano roll, you're limited by the metronome. And when you really get down and, as you get better as a producer, the similar thing happens when you start stretching out the tempos, you start adding different automation to your tracks. That's basically what I feel like conductors are like old school mixers where we have to like, basically the orchestra is like our DAW and we're like, moving those things around in real time. So that will absolutely not happen at the performance with a group this large. Like it physically cannot happen. Like sound travels way too slow as well, where like the visual cues will absolutely help. So almost out of time. So I think that's all the time I have for today. I had one more score, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yeah, so that wraps up our panel. Thank you all for coming. We're going to do a Q&A now.
So if you guys, you want to just go right ahead with the Q&A? Let's do
Yeah,
it.
let's go for Q&A.
You had mentioned as one of the methods of variation using counterpoint. How common is true polyphony in video game orchestration?
Counterpoint is rare. It's so rare. I mean,
Think of an example, I guess would be a better way of putting it.
yeah, it's that's a tough one. I mean, in video game music, if I were to, that's the thing. In video, I think it's. I don't know if it's actually ever been in video game music. You kind of, in melodies, you kind of hear it's not really that known, mainly due to. Let's do that. No, I actually can't really think of an example for that. It's just counterpoint is pretty rare when it comes to embellishing and everything. So
I'll jump in here. Actually, for one of our concerts in the next spring quarter, we're actually trying to scour for some early music influenced, and there's a few, not necessarily counterpoint, but there's a lot of Bach and a lot of like Baroque influences as well, and especially a lot of Uematsu stuff. Like some of his dancing mat is straight up directly quoted from Toccata and Fugue in D.
Katamari has a fugue.
And Katamari has a fugue
Oh,
as
yeah.
well.
Yeah,
it
there's
does.
a whole fugue that happens in Katamari, and it's all done.
Final Fantasy IX, the place I'll return to someday. There's a lot of that's definitely like recorder quartet. It doesn't get more like, Renaissance than that, really. Do you have a question back there? Yeah, that's right too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So they're definitely out there, and we're probably just blanking out because we probably have like 4 hours of sleep in the past 3 days or so. But they're definitely out there, and that's going to be a future concert as well.
Mm-hmm.
Back there.
Was there any video game music or anything in particular that got you into like video game music? Was there any song that reminded you?
you want to go down the line for that? I don't know.
Anyone want to go? Yeah.
For me, it started from Super Smash Bros. Brawl, mostly because it was just a compilation of all this great music that I had loved from the past, but the fact that it was all in one place with a lot of sick remixes, I thought, oh man, I got to get this album. And that's how my journey began.
Mine is pretty stereotypical, like Ocarina of Time, like Zelda, honestly, I actually, as a kid, I don't know what the hell I was thinking, my brain wasn't developed. I was all about Mario back then. I liked the platforming challenge, and for some reason I perceived Zelda as like this rival to Mario, even though it's the same company, so Nintendo's still getting my money. But one day, one of my schoolyard friends brought like Ocarina of Time, and it was like, just blew my mind, not the open world, but like the fact that you're like all these songs are like magical and you got to play them and you heard all these it's like music was magic and it was affecting the world. It just blew my mind back then.
Yeah, I don't know for me if it's any specific song particular, but I've always enjoyed Mario, Zelda, Final Fantasy, so it's I guess more the Nintendo classics for me.
For me, the one video game soundtrack which got me into mainly orchestration and knowing that video game music is just like any other kind of orchestrated music is Chrono Cross from the PlayStation. And the reason why is that when you get a PlayStation and it's back in the day and you see those graphics and everything, and for me, when I play Chrono Cross, you hear the soundtrack, and it was phenomenal during the time. You hear actual instruments, you hear a very vivid sort of a color to the song as well, and that what really got me into video game music.
there isn't really a piece that got me into it, but what made me realize it matters is Austin Wintry came and did a presentation at UMD, and he is phenomenal, just the way that he explained how Journey changed him. And he was getting millions and millions and millions of letters. You saved me from killing myself. You helped me connect to my grandparents because of this game. You helped me get out of my depression. You helped me start going to see a therapist because this music moved me so much and I couldn't stand the feeling that I needed to just get out. And the way he explained it, I mean, because before, no offense, I love him to death. He was a little, but then after that, he was so down to earth. He was ready to go. He was just amazing. And I love him so much for that. And that made me realize this matters.
Yeah. Other questions?
I think we have time for one more.
Yes.
As far as jazz-influenced video game soundtracks, where would be a good place to look for that?
Ooh, I got this one. Again, what goes to Ross's PowerPoint, the golden age of video game for the N64. The N64 is a great start to kind of figure out like where the whole start of jazz influence in video games, and this is just my opinion. Banjo-Kazooie kind of has a bright, cheery theme, but also has a lot of non-functional harmony and also like a lot of 7th and 9th chords as well, which kind of gives you a start of jazz influence. One of my favorite games, which I always tell people, if you want to listen to jazz and you want to know where kind of the origins of jazz, origins of video game music jazz is Pilot Wings 64, which is a very good one.
Gee.
So definitely listen to that.
Birdman
Donkey Kong
theme.
Country as well, yeah.
All right. I think that's it.
I think we're out of time. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming to our panel.
Yeah, thank you all
Thank you,
so
everyone.
much.